Marcus Chen had been drifting in the escape pod for 3 days when the alien ship found him. The sleek vessel appeared on his sensors like a metallic predator, its hull gleaming with an otherworldly purple sheen that hurt to look at directly. He'd expected this moment ever since his research vessel had been destroyed in the outer rim of the Kepler system. But expecting something and being ready for it were two different things entirely. The electromagnetic pulse that disabled his pod's systems came without warning. One moment he was monitoring the alien ship's approach, calculating possible escape vectors, and the next his screens went dark. Emergency lighting bathed the cramped interior in hellish red as the pod shuddered under the grip of a tractor beam. Through the small viewport, Marcus watched the alien ship grow larger until it filled his entire field of vision. Docking bays opened like hungry mouths along its hull, and he felt his pod being drawn inexorably toward one of them. His military training kicked in automatically, cataloging every detail he could observe. The ship was massive, easily 10 times the size of the largest human vessels he'd seen. Strange symbols covered its hull in flowing patterns that seemed to shift when he wasn't looking directly at them. The docking process was surprisingly gentle. His pod settled onto a platform with barely a tremor, and through the viewport he could see the bay doors sealing shut. Atmosphere flooded the chamber with visible vapor, and gravity kicked in with a slight lurch that told him the artificial gravity was stronger than Earth normal. Marcus quickly activated his suit's recording systems and emergency beacon, though he doubted the latter would reach human space from wherever he was. The beacon was designed to broadcast for months if necessary, sending out a continuous stream of his location and status. It was a long shot, but it was all he had. Figures approached his pod, and Marcus got his first clear look at his captors. They were tall, perhaps 8 feet in height, with elongated limbs that moved with an unsettling fluid grace. Their skin appeared to be a deep blue-black color, almost metallic in the artificial light. What struck him most were their faces, if they could be called faces. Instead of features, each alien wore what looked like a smooth mask of the same metallic material as their skin, with no visible eyes or mouth. One of them pressed something against his pod's hull, and Marcus heard the unmistakable sound of cutting tools. They were methodical and efficient, working with the kind of practiced ease that suggested they'd done this many times before. Within minutes, they had breached his pod's integrity and were flooding it with some kind of gas. Marcus held his breath as long as he could, but the gas was pervasive. It seeped through his suit's filters despite their military-grade specifications. As consciousness began to slip away, he managed to activate one final protocol, a dead man switch built into his suit that would begin broadcasting a specific signal pattern if his vital signs flatlined or if he remained unconscious for more than 6 hours. When he woke, Marcus found himself in what could only be described as a cell. The walls were smooth and seamless, made of the same purple-tinted metal as the ship's hull. There was no visible door, no windows, and no furniture except for a simple bench that seemed to grow directly from the floor. Soft light emanated from the walls themselves, casting everything in an eerie glow. His suit was gone, replaced by a simple gray garment that felt like cloth but shimmered with an almost liquid quality. His hands were bare, and he could feel the cool air against his skin. The atmosphere was breathable, though it had a strange metallic taste that reminded him of blood. Marcus sat on the bench and forced himself to think clearly. His captors had been careful not to harm him, which suggested they wanted him alive and functional. That was both good and bad news. Good because it meant he had time to plan and act. Bad because it meant they had specific plans for him, and those plans likely didn't involve his eventual release. He began a systematic examination of his cell, using techniques learned during SEER training. Every surface, every joint, every variation in texture or color was cataloged and analyzed. The walls appeared to be seamless, but Marcus knew that was impossible. There had to be weaknesses, access panels, or at least the mechanism by which they'd brought him inside. After what felt like hours of careful inspection, he found it. A section of wall near the floor showed the faintest variation in color, barely visible even when he looked directly at it. It was rectangular, approximately 3 feet by 2 feet, and when he pressed against it, he could feel the slightest give in the material. Before he could investigate further, the section of wall he'd been examining suddenly became transparent. Beyond it stood 3 of the alien beings, their masked faces turned toward him with an attention that was somehow palpable, despite their lack of visible eyes. One of them raised what was clearly a weapon, though its design was unlike anything in human military arsenals. Instead of a barrel or projectile system, it appeared to be a crystalline matrix surrounded by flowing energy patterns. The alien's intentions were clear even without words. Marcus raised his hands slowly, showing his palms in what he hoped was a universal gesture of non-aggression. The aliens watched him for several long moments, then the one with the weapon lowered it slightly. The transparent section of wall became opaque again, leaving Marcus alone with his thoughts. His situation was clear now. He was a prisoner aboard an alien vessel, presumably being taken to some kind of detention facility or research center. His captors were technologically advanced, well-organized, and apparently accustomed to taking prisoners from other species. The fact that they'd provided him with breathable atmosphere and appropriate clothing suggested they understood human physiology, which meant they'd encountered humans before. That thought sent a chill down Marcus's spine. If they'd captured humans previously, what had happened to them? Were there other human prisoners aboard this ship, or had his predecessors met a different fate entirely? Marcus forced himself to push aside such speculation. He needed to focus on the immediate situation and the resources available to him. He was alive, uninjured, and apparently being kept in reasonable conditions. His military training was intact, and his captors had no idea what kind of training that was. The alien technology was advanced, but every system had vulnerabilities. Every prison had weaknesses. Every captor made mistakes. Marcus Chen was a Navy SEAL, trained to survive, adapt, and overcome in the most extreme circumstances imaginable. His captors might have superior technology, but they didn't understand what they had captured. That would be their first mistake. Marcus intended to make sure it was also their last. The routine began 12 hours after Marcus's capture. Every 6 hours, a section of the wall would dissolve into transparency, revealing a single alien who would observe him for exactly 3 minutes before the wall returned to its opaque state. The precision was almost mechanical, and Marcus began to suspect he was dealing with a highly regimented military or scientific organization. During these observation periods, Marcus made sure to appear docile and confused, playing the role of a frightened civilian researcher. He would sit on the bench with his head in his hands, occasionally looking up with what he hoped appeared to be desperation. It was a calculated performance designed to make his captors underestimate him, while he gathered intelligence about their procedures and technology. Between observations, Marcus continued his methodical examination of the cell. He discovered that the walls weren't truly seamless, but were composed of interlocking panels so perfectly fitted that the joints were nearly invisible. The bench wasn't grown from the floor as he'd initially thought, but was a separate piece that had been precisely fitted into place. Most importantly, he found that the lighting system responded to his presence, dimming when he remained still for extended periods and brightening when he moved around. This suggested the cell was equipped with sophisticated sensors that monitored his activities and vital signs. It also meant that any escape attempt would need to account for constant surveillance. Marcus filed this information away while continuing to appear dejected and passive during the observation periods. On what he estimated to be the 3rd day of his captivity, the routine changed. Instead of a single observer, 3 aliens appeared beyond the transparent wall. One carried what appeared to be a tablet-like device, while another held a cylinder that pulsed with soft blue light. The third remained motionless, its masked face directed toward Marcus with that same unsettling attention. The alien with the device began manipulating it with fluid gestures, and suddenly Marcus heard sounds emanating from the walls around him. They weren't quite words, more like musical tones that rose and fell in complex patterns. After several minutes of this, the alien paused and appeared to wait for a response. Marcus realized they were attempting to establish communication. He stood slowly and approached the transparent section, careful to move in a non-threatening manner. When he reached the wall, he placed his palm against it and said clearly, "My name is Marcus Chen. I'm a researcher from Earth. I don't understand your language." The reaction was immediate. All 3 aliens leaned forward slightly, and the device in the first one's hands began glowing more brightly. The musical tones started again, but this time they were accompanied by what Marcus could only describe as mathematical concepts being projected directly into his mind. Numbers, geometric shapes, and basic physical constants appeared in his consciousness with startling clarity. They were using mathematics as a universal language, starting with fundamental concepts and building toward more complex ideas. Marcus's engineering background served him well as he began to grasp their methodology. When they projected the concept of hydrogen, he nodded and said hydrogen aloud. When they showed him water molecules, he responded with water and made drinking motions. The process continued for over an hour, with the aliens methodically building a basic vocabulary of concepts and their corresponding sounds in Marcus's language. They were remarkably patient and thorough, displaying an intelligence that impressed him despite his circumstances. By the end of the session, they had established rudimentary communication protocols, and Marcus had learned that they called themselves something that roughly translated to the Dominion. After the communication session ended and the wall returned to opacity, Marcus sat on his bench and processed what he'd learned. The Dominion was clearly an advanced spacefaring civilization with sophisticated technology and scientific methods. They were methodical, patient, and intelligent. They were also, based on his current situation, expansionist and willing to capture members of other species for unknown purposes. The fact that they'd invested time in establishing communication suggested they had plans for him beyond simple imprisonment. This could be good or bad depending on their intentions, but it gave him opportunities he wouldn't have had otherwise. If he could continue to appear cooperative while gathering intelligence, he might learn enough about their capabilities and weaknesses to plan an effective escape. 2 days later, the communication sessions resumed with greater complexity. The aliens had apparently analyzed his responses and developed a more sophisticated translation system. The device now projected concepts that were accompanied by synthesized versions of human speech patterns, creating a crude but functional translator. "You are called Marcus Chen," the lead alien said through the device, its voice a strange mechanical approximation of human speech. "You are from the world Earth. You were found in damaged vessel." "Yes," Marcus replied, maintaining his cover story. "My research ship was destroyed by an asteroid impact. I barely escaped in a life pod." "Research," the alien repeated, and Marcus sensed intense interest in its posture. "You study stars? Planets? Life forms?" "I study stellar formation and planetary geology," Marcus lied smoothly. "I was collecting mineral samples from asteroid belts when the accident happened." This explanation seemed to satisfy them, and Marcus felt a small surge of relief. His cover story positioned him as a valuable scientific asset rather than a potential military threat. The aliens continued their questioning, focusing on human technology, social structures, and the location of Earth. Marcus provided carefully edited information, mixing truth with strategic misdirection. He described human technology as being significantly less advanced than it actually was, portrayed Earth's population as smaller and more scattered than reality, and suggested that humanity had only recently achieved interstellar travel. All of this served to make humans appear less threatening, while potentially valuable as subjects for study. During these sessions, Marcus also gathered crucial intelligence about his captors. The Dominion was apparently a vast interstellar empire that had been expanding across the galaxy for thousands of years. They collected species and civilizations like specimens, studying them and incorporating useful technologies or biological traits into their own systems. Humans were a recent discovery, and Marcus was among the first to be captured for detailed study. This information chilled him to the bone. If the Dominion was harvesting other civilizations, then humanity was in serious danger. His escape wasn't just about personal survival anymore. It was about warning Earth of an existential threat. The aliens also revealed, perhaps inadvertently, that their ship was part of a larger fleet currently moving toward human space. They spoke of collection protocols and integration procedures in ways that suggested they had done this to other species before. The fate of those previous victims remained unclear, but Marcus suspected it hadn't been pleasant. As the communication sessions continued, Marcus began to notice patterns in the aliens' behavior and technology. Their movements were fluid but slightly predictable, suggesting they followed specific protocols for different situations. Their technology, while advanced, showed signs of standardization across different functions, implying they relied on established systems rather than adaptive improvisation. Most importantly, he observed that the transparent wall system had a slight delay between when the aliens activated it and when it actually became opaque. It was barely perceptible, perhaps half a second, but it represented a potential vulnerability in their security system. Marcus filed all of this information away while maintaining his facade of cooperative helplessness. His captors believed they had acquired a valuable scientific specimen who could provide intelligence about a newly discovered species. They had no idea they were dealing with a warrior trained in the most advanced military techniques humanity had developed. The irony wasn't lost on him. The Dominion's methodical approach to collecting and studying other species would be their downfall. They were so focused on understanding him that they weren't prepared for the possibility that he might be understanding them even better. Marcus's opportunity came during his 8th day of captivity. The Dominion scientists had grown increasingly confident in their interactions with him, spending longer periods observing and questioning him about human physiology and culture. Their security protocols had become routine, predictable, and ultimately vulnerable to exploitation. The breakthrough came when they decided to conduct what they called a physical assessment. Instead of questioning him from behind the transparent wall, they actually entered his cell for the first time. 3 aliens materialized through what Marcus now realized was some kind of molecular dissolution technology, rather than a traditional door. They moved with their characteristic fluid grace, but Marcus noted immediately that they were completely unprepared for close-quarters combat. Their movements were scientific and precise, but lacked the controlled aggression and spatial awareness that marked trained fighters. They approached him with instruments that hummed with exotic energies, clearly designed to scan and analyze rather than restrain or incapacitate. Marcus allowed them to approach, maintaining his facade of nervous cooperation while his mind raced through tactical assessments. 3 opponents, approximately 8 feet tall, with longer reach than humans, but likely less dense bone and muscle structure based on their fluid movements. Unknown technological advantages, but overconfident and unprepared for resistance. "Please remain stationary," the lead alien said through its translation device. "The scanning process requires minimal movement for accurate results." "Of course," Marcus replied, raising his arms slightly in apparent compliance. "Will this hurt?" "Negative. The process is entirely passive." The alien moved closer, raising a device that looked like a crystalline wand toward Marcus's chest. That was when Marcus struck. His first move was a simple palm strike to what he estimated was the alien's center of gravity, just below where a human's ribcage would be. The impact sent the creature staggering backward with a sound like breaking glass. The second alien began to react, but Marcus was already moving, his hand closing around the fallen scanning device. The weapon felt strange in his grip, lighter than it should be and warm to the touch. When he pointed it at the second alien and activated what appeared to be a trigger mechanism, the device emitted a pulse of brilliant energy that sent the creature crashing into the wall with enough force to crack the smooth surface. The third alien was retreating toward the cell's entrance, but Marcus was faster. A diving tackle brought them both to the ground, and Marcus quickly applied a blood choke that should have rendered any humanoid unconscious within seconds. The aliens' struggles grew weaker and finally ceased, confirming that their physiology was similar enough to humans for his combat techniques to be effective. Marcus quickly searched the unconscious aliens, finding several devices he couldn't identify but which were clearly technological tools. More importantly, he found what appeared to be a key card or access device worn by the lead alien. The small, crystalline rectangle felt warm in his hands and pulsed with internal light when he touched it. The cell's exit was still open, the molecular dissolution field maintaining a doorway that led into a corridor beyond. Marcus paused at the threshold, listening for signs of alarm or approaching guards. The ship seemed strangely quiet, with only a distant humming that he assumed was engine noise or life support systems. Stepping into the corridor, Marcus found himself in a space that defied easy description. The walls curved in ways that shouldn't have been possible, creating an optical illusion that made distances difficult to judge. Soft lighting emanated from the surfaces themselves, casting everything in that same purple-tinted glow he'd observed from his cell. More importantly, the corridor was empty. Either his assault on the aliens had gone unnoticed, or the ship operated with a smaller crew than he'd anticipated. Both possibilities worked in his favor, but he couldn't count on his luck holding indefinitely. Marcus chose a direction at random and began moving through the ship, staying close to the walls and pausing frequently to listen for signs of activity. The alien vessel was vast, with corridors branching off in multiple directions and chambers whose purposes he could only guess at. Some spaces were clearly laboratories, filled with equipment that hummed and sparked with alien energy. Others appeared to be storage areas, containing items from what he assumed were dozens of different species and civilizations. In one chamber, Marcus discovered something that made his blood run cold. Stasis pods lined the walls, each containing what appeared to be a member of a different alien species. Some were humanoid, others barely recognizable as living beings, but all were clearly being preserved for some unknown purpose. This was the fate that awaited specimens collected by the Dominion, kept in suspended animation like insects in amber. As he moved deeper into the ship, Marcus began to understand the true scope of what he was dealing with. The Dominion wasn't just an expansionist empire, they were collectors on a galactic scale. Every species they encountered was catalogued, studied, and preserved. The ship was essentially a mobile museum of conquered civilizations, a testament to the Dominion's ruthless efficiency. The realization fueled his determination to escape and warn humanity of what was coming. Earth needed to know about the Dominion before the collection fleet arrived. More immediately, he needed to find the ship's communication systems and navigation controls. His exploration led him to what was clearly the ship's command center. The space was dominated by a raised platform surrounded by holographic displays, showing star charts, ship schematics, and data streams in the flowing alien script. Several Dominion crew members stood at various stations, their masked faces turned toward the displays with focused attention. Marcus counted 6 aliens in the command center, too many to engage directly even with the element of surprise. He needed a different approach, something that would disable the ship without requiring him to fight his way through the entire crew. The answer came when he noticed one of the displays showing what appeared to be the ship's power distribution system. The Dominion technology was advanced, but it followed logical engineering principles. Every system had vulnerabilities, and every ship had critical points of failure. Marcus retreated from the command center and began searching for the ship's engineering section. His military training included extensive technical education, and while alien technology was unfamiliar, the basic principles of power generation and distribution were universal constants. He found the engineering section 3 decks below the command center, accessible through a maintenance shaft he discovered behind a storage chamber. The space was filled with humming machinery and conduits carrying streams of energy that cast dancing shadows on the walls. At the center of it all was what could only be the ship's primary power core, a sphere of crystalline material that pulsed with contained energy. It was beautiful and terrible at the same time, representing both the pinnacle of alien engineering and his best hope for escape. Marcus approached the power core carefully, studying the control interfaces surrounding it. The alien script was meaningless to him, but the basic layout suggested systems for monitoring, regulation, and emergency shutdown. Every power system had safeguards, and every safeguard could be bypassed if you understood the underlying principles. Working with careful precision, Marcus began manipulating the controls around the power core. He couldn't read the alien language, but he could interpret the visual displays and energy flow patterns. Slowly, methodically, he began to induce controlled instabilities in the ship's power grid. Lights began to flicker throughout the engineering section, and alarms started sounding in frequencies that made his teeth ache. Perfect. The crew would be focused on diagnosing and fixing the power problems, giving him the opportunity he needed to reach the ship's communication systems. As Marcus made his way back toward the command center, emergency lighting cast everything in hellish red shadows. Alien voices echoed through the corridors, filled with urgency and confusion. The ship's crew was doing exactly what he'd hoped they would do, rushing to contain what they believed was a technical malfunction. The command center was in chaos when Marcus arrived, with crew members frantically working at their stations while holographic displays flashed warnings in the alien script. Most importantly, the communication station was temporarily abandoned as its operator had joined the damage control efforts. Marcus slipped into the command center during the confusion and made his way to the communication station. The interface was unlike anything he'd ever seen, but the basic function was clear. Arrays, transmission frequencies, and signal strength. Indicators were universal concepts regardless of the technology implementing them. Working quickly but carefully, Marcus began attempting to establish a connection with human space. The ship's communication array was incredibly powerful, capable of reaching across vast interstellar distances instantaneously. If he could get through to any human installation, he could warn them about the approaching Dominion fleet. The moment Marcus completed his transmission to human space, alarms throughout the ship changed pitch and intensity. The random technical difficulties he'd created had been discovered and traced back to sabotage. Worse, his presence at the communication station had been detected by whatever security systems monitored the command center. Heavy footfalls echoed through the corridors as Dominion security forces mobilized. These weren't the scientists and researchers Marcus had encountered before. Through the command center's transparent walls, he could see armored figures moving with military precision, carrying weapons that crackled with lethal energy. The Dominion's scientific curiosity about their human specimen had been replaced by cold efficiency. Marcus grabbed several alien devices from the communication station, hoping they might prove useful, then looked for alternate exits from the command center. The main entrance was already blocked by approaching security forces, but emergency procedures in any civilization would require multiple evacuation routes from critical areas. He found what he was looking for behind the primary command console, a maintenance hatch that led to the ship's internal service network. The opening was barely large enough for his human frame, but it was his only option as energy weapons began discharging in the corridor outside. The service tunnels were a maze of conduits, support struts, and access panels that ran throughout the ship like arteries in a living body. Marcus crawled through spaces that were clearly never intended for creatures his size, following the largest passages while listening to the sounds of pursuit echoing through the ship's structure. His escape through the tunnels gave him a new perspective on the Dominion vessel's construction. The ship wasn't just large, it was vast beyond anything humans had ever built. Entire sections were dedicated to purposes he could only guess at, with chambers that stretched beyond the reach of his vision and machinery that hummed with purposes he couldn't fathom. More disturbing were the sounds that drifted through the service tunnels from various parts of the ship. Alien voices speaking in languages he didn't recognize, mechanical noises that suggested automated processes at work, and underneath it all, a subsonic vibration that seemed to resonate in his bones. The ship was alive with activity, much of it non-human. After what felt like hours of crawling through increasingly cramped passages, Marcus emerged into what appeared to be a storage bay. Unlike the sterile cleanliness of the scientific sections, this area had an industrial feel with containers stacked in organized rows and loading equipment positioned throughout the space. The containers themselves were fascinating and terrifying in equal measure. Each bore markings in different alien scripts, suggesting they contained specimens or artifacts from numerous civilizations. Some were clearly designed for living cargo, with life support systems and environmental controls. Others appeared to hold technological artifacts or raw materials. Marcus realized he was looking at the Dominion's collection system in operation. This ship wasn't just a research vessel. It was a mobile harvesting platform that stripped entire civilizations of anything valuable before moving on to the next target. The scale of the operation was staggering, representing centuries or millennia of systematic conquest and exploitation. Moving carefully between the containers, Marcus searched for anything that might help him survive or escape. Most of the alien technology was incomprehensible, but some items were recognizably functional despite their exotic appearance. He found what appeared to be a personal energy shield generator and a device that projected a hard light cutting beam. More importantly, he discovered a section of containers that held items of human origin. Fragments of spacecraft hull, personal effects, and technological components that clearly came from human vessels. The implications were chilling. The Dominion had been studying and harvesting human technology and personnel for longer than anyone on Earth realized. Among the human artifacts, Marcus found a military communications device that had been partially disassembled for analysis. The unit was damaged but potentially functional, and it represented his best hope of establishing ongoing contact with human forces rather than the single transmission he'd managed from the command center. As he worked to repair the communicator using components from other human devices, Marcus heard the distinctive sound of search teams entering the storage bay. The Dominion security forces had tracked him through the service tunnels and were now conducting a systematic sweep of the area. Marcus quickly activated the human shield generator, feeling invisible energy fields wrap around his body like a second skin. The technology was unfamiliar, but the basic principle seemed sound. Energy impacts that should have been lethal were diffused and absorbed by the protective field. The first Dominion security team that found him discovered this the hard way. Their energy weapons struck the shield with brilliant flashes of light, but failed to penetrate its protection. Marcus responded with the hard light cutting beam, which sliced through their armor with devastating efficiency. What followed was a running battle through the storage bay as more security teams converged on his position. The Dominion forces were well trained and disciplined, but they were unprepared for the aggressive tactics Marcus employed. They expected their captured specimen to hide and flee, not to turn and fight with lethal precision. Marcus used the maze of containers as cover while picking off individual security team members with calculated strikes. The hard light cutter was incredibly effective against their armor, while the shield generator protected him from return fire. More importantly, his human agility and combat instincts gave him advantages the aliens couldn't match. The tide began to turn when Marcus managed to activate the repaired human communicator. The device immediately established contact with a human military frequency, connecting him directly to Admiral Sarah Rodriguez at Earth Defense Command. "This is Commander Marcus Chen, Navy SEAL, currently aboard a Dominion collection vessel," he reported while ducking behind a container as energy bolts flashed overhead. "I am transmitting tactical data about an alien invasion fleet approaching human space. Prepare immediate defensive measures." The response was immediate and professional. "Commander Chen, this is Admiral Rodriguez. Your previous transmission has been received and analyzed. Fleet assets are being mobilized. What is your current status?" "I am in active combat aboard the enemy vessel," Marcus replied, using the hard light cutter to disable another security team. "The ship contains advanced technology and intelligence about Dominion capabilities. I am attempting to secure additional data for transmission." "Negative, Commander. Extraction is the priority. We're tracking your signal and have ships moving to intercept." Marcus felt a surge of hope at the news, but he also realized the limitations of his situation. Human ships were days or weeks away at best, while he was trapped aboard a hostile vessel with increasingly aggressive security forces. His immediate survival depended on his own capabilities and the alien equipment he'd acquired. The battle in the storage bay continued for several more minutes, before Marcus managed to break contact and retreat to another section of the ship. The Dominion forces were learning from their encounters with him, adapting their tactics and bringing heavier weapons to bear. The shield generator was beginning to show signs of energy depletion, and the hard light cutter required time to recharge between uses. Marcus found temporary refuge in what appeared to be a medical facility, filled with alien equipment designed for treating injuries across multiple species. The irony wasn't lost on him that he was hiding in a hospital while fighting for his life, but the medical bay offered both concealment and potential resources. Among the medical equipment, he found devices that appeared to be designed for emergency treatment and life support. Some were clearly intended for use on humans, suggesting the Dominion had been preparing for larger-scale human captures. This confirmed his worst fears about their intentions toward Earth. The medical facility also contained detailed biological data about numerous alien species, including what appeared to be comprehensive files on human physiology and psychology. The Dominion's understanding of humanity was far more extensive than he'd realized, covering everything from basic biological functions to cultural and psychological profiles. Most disturbing of all was a section of the medical facility that appeared to be dedicated to biological modification and enhancement. The equipment suggested the Dominion didn't just study other species, they modified and improved them for specific purposes. Some containers held what appeared to be enhanced versions of various alien creatures, while others contained hybrid organisms that combined traits from multiple species. As Marcus studied the horrifying evidence of the Dominion's biological manipulation programs, he realized the true scope of the threat facing humanity. This wasn't just conquest. It was systematic transformation and exploitation of entire civilizations. The Dominion turned other species into components of their empire, preserving what was useful and discarding the rest. The communicator crackled with incoming messages from Admiral Rodriguez and Earth Defense Command. Human forces were mobilizing across the solar system, but they needed more intelligence about Dominion capabilities and weaknesses. Marcus realized his mission had Marcus's exploration of the medical facility revealed something that changed everything. Hidden behind a wall panel he'd forced open with the hard light cutter, he discovered a chamber that defied his worst expectations about the Dominion's activities. Row upon row of stasis pods lined the walls, but these weren't preserving alien specimens for study. They contained what appeared to be enhanced versions of various species, including several that had been modified with human genetic material. The implications hit him like a physical blow. The Dominion wasn't just planning to conquer humanity. They were already incorporating human traits into their enhancement programs. Some of the creatures in the pods had recognizably human features combined with alien characteristics, creating hybrid beings that represented the ultimate violation of human dignity and autonomy. Marcus forced himself to document everything with the communicator's recording systems, transmitting the evidence back to Earth Defense Command even as his stomach churned at what he was seeing. Admiral Rodriguez's response was immediate and filled with barely controlled fury. "Commander Chen, the data you're transmitting is being analyzed by our best xenobiologists. What you've discovered confirms our worst fears about Dominion intentions. How many of these enhanced specimens are aboard your vessel?" Marcus conducted a quick count of the visible pods while keeping watch for security forces. "At least 200 enhanced specimens in this facility alone, Admiral. Based on the ship's size, there could be thousands more in other sections. The Dominion has been conducting these experiments for a long time." "Understood. Continue gathering intelligence, but be prepared for immediate extraction. Our fastest ships are burning hard toward your position, but they're still 18 hours out." 18 hours. Marcus assessed his situation with grim realism. His shield generator was down to perhaps 20% power. The hard light cutter was showing signs of energy depletion, and he was deep inside a hostile vessel, with an increasingly aggressive security force hunting him. Surviving another 18 hours seemed optimistic at best. But as he moved deeper into the medical facility, Marcus discovered something that might change the odds in his favor. A section of the facility appeared to be dedicated to controlling and programming the enhanced specimens. Banks of crystalline computers processed vast amounts of data while maintaining connections to the stasis pods throughout the ship. The control systems were alien in design but followed logical principles that Marcus could interpret through careful observation. Status displays showed the locations and conditions of specimens throughout the vessel, while command interfaces appeared to control everything from life support to behavioral programming. Most importantly, Marcus realized that the enhanced specimens weren't just preserved for study. They were being prepared for deployment as weapons. The Dominion's plan involved not just conquering other civilizations, but turning their own populations against them through biological modification and mental programming. This discovery gave Marcus an idea that was either brilliant or suicidal. If he could access the control systems and reprogram the enhanced specimens, he might be able to turn the Dominion's own weapons against them. The risk was enormous, as releasing hundreds of enhanced creatures aboard the ship could easily result in his own death, but it might also create enough chaos to disable the vessel entirely. Working with desperate urgency, Marcus began interfacing with the alien control systems. The crystalline computers responded to touch and mental focus in ways that reminded him of advanced human neural interfaces, but with capabilities far beyond anything in Earth's technology. As he worked, he could feel the alien systems probing his mind, trying to understand his intentions and capabilities. The mental contact was unsettling, like having foreign thoughts inserted into his consciousness, but it also gave him unprecedented access to the ship's information networks. Through the alien computers, Marcus gained a comprehensive understanding of the vessel's layout, crew complement, and current status. What he learned was both encouraging and terrifying. The ship carried a crew of approximately 300 Dominion personnel, but it also contained over 5,000 specimens from dozens of different species. Most were in stasis, but nearly 1,000 had been enhanced and programmed for various military and scientific purposes. More importantly, Marcus discovered that his sabotage of the power systems had caused more damage than he'd realized. Several critical systems were operating at reduced capacity, including the ship's primary weapons and defensive shields. The vessel was vulnerable in ways that the crew might not fully understand. As Marcus worked to reprogram the specimen control systems, he maintained contact with Admiral Rodriguez through the communicator. "Admiral, I'm attempting to disable the ship from within using their own enhanced specimens. If successful, this vessel could provide unprecedented intelligence about Dominion technology and capabilities." "Commander, that sounds extremely dangerous." "What are the risks?" "Significant," Marcus admitted while manipulating alien interfaces that responded to his thoughts as much as his touch. The enhanced specimens include predatory species with capabilities far beyond human norms, but they've been programmed to obey Dominion control protocols. If I can modify those protocols, they might target the crew instead of following their orders. Proceed with extreme caution, Commander. We need you alive to provide intelligence when our ships arrive. Marcus's modifications to the control systems were necessarily crude, limited by his incomplete understanding of the alien technology and the time pressure of his situation, but the basic principle was sound. The enhanced specimens were programmed with target recognition and behavioral protocols that could be altered through the central control systems. Instead of identifying Dominion personnel as allies and other species as enemies, Marcus reversed the targeting parameters. The enhanced specimens would now recognize Dominion crew members as threats to be eliminated and other species as allies to be protected. It wasn't sophisticated, but it should be effective. The moment Marcus activated his modifications, alarms began sounding throughout the medical facility. The alien control systems had detected the unauthorized changes and were attempting to implement security lockdowns. But Marcus had already initiated the awakening sequence for enhanced specimens throughout the ship. The first creatures to emerge from stasis were located in the medical facility itself. Marcus watched through the control system's monitors as pods began opening, and their occupants stirred to consciousness. The enhanced specimens were magnificent and terrifying, representing the pinnacle of biological engineering applied to already formidable alien species. One creature appeared to be based on a feline predator, but enhanced with armored skin and retractable energy claws. Another resembled a reptilian warrior with natural weapons and enhanced musculature that could probably tear through steel bulkheads. A third defied easy categorization, appearing to be a hybrid of multiple species, with capabilities Marcus could only guess at. As the enhanced specimens fully awakened and processed their surroundings, Marcus held his breath. Everything depended on whether his hasty reprogramming had been successful. If the creatures still followed their original Dominion protocols, he was about to be torn apart by some of the most dangerous predators in the galaxy. The lead creature, the enhanced feline, turned its attention toward Marcus and approached with fluid grace. Its eyes were intelligent and alert, clearly processing the situation and making decisions based on its programming. When it was close enough to strike, the creature paused and tilted its head in what appeared to be curiosity, rather than aggression. Marcus slowly raised his hand in what he hoped was a peaceful gesture. The enhanced creature studied him for a long moment, then moved past him toward the facility's main entrance. Its focus was on the sounds of approaching Dominion security forces, not on the human who had freed it from stasis. Similar scenes were playing out throughout the ship as hundreds of enhanced specimens awakened and began moving through the corridors. Marcus watched through the control system's monitors as chaos erupted across multiple decks. Dominion crew members found themselves facing the very weapons they had created, now turned against them with lethal efficiency. The enhanced specimens were devastating in their effectiveness. Centuries of biological modification and enhancement had created creatures perfectly adapted for combat in the confined spaces of a starship. They moved with predatory intelligence, working together in ways that suggested sophisticated pack tactics and strategic thinking. But Marcus's reprogramming wasn't perfect, and some specimens seemed confused by their conflicting directives. A few attacked indiscriminately, while others remained passive and uncertain. The chaos was spreading throughout the ship, but it wasn't the coordinated assault Marcus had hoped to achieve. Through the communicator, Admiral Rodriguez provided updates on the approaching human fleet. "Commander, our lead ships are now 12 hours out, but we're detecting massive energy signatures from your location. What's your status?" "I've initiated a revolt among the Dominion's enhanced specimens," Marcus reported while watching security feeds of battles raging throughout the ship. Marcus's journey through the chaos-consumed Dominion ship became a surreal nightmare of alien warfare. The enhanced feline creature, which he'd mentally dubbed Shadow due to its dark fur and silent movement, proved to be an invaluable ally. The creature seemed to understand his objectives through some kind of intuitive intelligence, clearing paths through hostile territory and alerting him to threats before they became visible. The ship's corridors had become battlegrounds where enhanced specimens fought Dominion security forces in running battles that left energy burns on the walls and bodies scattered across the deck plating. Some areas were completely impassable due to the intensity of the fighting, forcing Marcus and Shadow to navigate through maintenance tunnels and service passages. Through it all, Marcus maintained contact with Admiral Rodriguez and Earth Defense Command. The approaching human fleet had been reinforced with additional ships, but they were still hours away from reaching his position. More importantly, the intelligence he was gathering about Dominion technology and capabilities was being transmitted in real time to human scientists and military strategists. "Commander Chen, the data you're providing is invaluable," Admiral Rodriguez reported through the communicator. "Our xenobiologists are analyzing the enhancement procedures you've documented. If we can understand how the Dominion modifies other species, we might be able to develop countermeasures." "Understood, Admiral," Marcus replied while crouched in a maintenance shaft as energy weapons discharged in the corridor below. "I'm attempting to reach the ship's central command core. If I can access their navigation and communication systems, I might be able to determine the exact composition and destination of the invasion fleet." The route to the command core took Marcus and Shadow through sections of the ship he hadn't seen before. Some areas were clearly devoted to research and development, with laboratories containing equipment that defied human understanding. Others appeared to be manufacturing facilities, where the Dominion created their enhanced specimens and technological devices. Most disturbing were the chambers that contained what appeared to be entire ecosystems from conquered worlds. Vast enclosed spaces held alien forests, oceans, and even what looked like sections of cities from various civilizations. The Dominion wasn't just collecting specimens and technology. They were preserving entire chunks of conquered worlds like exhibits in a museum. In one such chamber, Marcus discovered something that stopped him cold. A section of what was clearly a human city, complete with recognizable architecture and technology. The preservation was perfect, down to personal belongings left behind by inhabitants who had presumably been captured or killed. The implications were staggering. The Dominion had been operating on or near human worlds for longer than anyone had suspected. Shadow growled softly, alerting Marcus to approaching danger. Through the transparent walls of the preserved city section, he could see Dominion security forces moving in organized patterns. They were conducting systematic sweeps of the ship, trying to regain control of areas that had been overrun by the enhanced specimens. The security forces had adapted to fighting their own enhanced creatures, using weapons and tactics specifically designed to counter the biological modifications they had created. Energy nets that could restrain even the most powerful specimens, sonic disruptors that interfered with enhanced sensory systems, and coordinated team tactics that prevented the creatures from using their pack-hunting instincts effectively. Marcus watched the security sweep through his binoculars, studying their equipment and procedures. The Dominion forces were professional and efficient, but they were also following predictable patterns. Military training was universal in some respects, regardless of species, and Marcus could exploit that universality. When the security team passed his hiding position, Marcus and Shadow moved quickly through the preserved city section toward the central core of the ship. The artificial environment was eerily accurate to human cities Marcus had seen, complete with street layouts and architectural details that suggested the Dominion's intelligence about human civilization was extremely comprehensive. The Central Command Core was located at the ship's heart, protected by multiple layers of security and structural barriers. As they approached the final checkpoint, Marcus realized that the chaos caused by the enhanced specimen revolt had been largely contained. The Dominion crew had regained control of critical systems and were now systematically hunting down the remaining rebellious creatures. Shadow seemed to sense the increasing danger, moving with heightened alertness and frequently pausing to listen for threats. The enhanced creature's senses were far superior to human capabilities, allowing it to detect approaching enemies long before Marcus would have been aware of them. The final approach to the command core required crossing an open area where several corridors converged. Dominion security forces had established a checkpoint with overlapping fields of fire and energy barriers that would stop even enhanced specimens. Marcus studied the defensive positions through his binoculars, calculating angles and timing. "Admiral, I'm at the final checkpoint before the command core," he reported quietly through the communicator. "Heavy security presence, but I think I can breach their perimeter. Once I'm inside, I should be able to access their primary navigation and communication systems. Commander, our lead ships are now 8 hours out. Can you hold your position until extraction is possible?" Marcus looked at the Dominion checkpoint, then at Shadow, who was watching him with intelligent eyes that seemed to understand the gravity of their situation. "Negative, Admiral. If I wait, they'll regain complete control of the ship and change all their security protocols. This is my best opportunity to gather critical intelligence about the invasion fleet." "Understood, Commander. Proceed with extreme caution." Marcus spent several minutes studying the checkpoint and developing a plan of attack. The Dominion forces were positioned to defend against frontal assault, but they hadn't anticipated a coordinated attack by a human operative and an enhanced creature working together. Shadow's capabilities would be crucial to the success of his plan. The assault began when Marcus used the hard light cutter to create a diversion on the far side of the checkpoint. Energy beams carved through wall panels and support structures, creating noise and visual effects that drew the attention of the security forces. While they were focused on the apparent sabotage attempt, Shadow moved through the shadows with predatory silence. The enhanced creature struck the Dominion forces from behind with devastating efficiency. Its energy claws sliced through armor like paper, while its enhanced speed and agility made it nearly impossible to target effectively. Within seconds, half the security team was down, and the survivors were in disarray. Marcus used the chaos to sprint across the open area, using his remaining shield generator power to absorb energy bolts from the surviving defenders. The shield collapsed just as he reached the command core's entrance, but it had protected him long enough to complete his approach. The command core itself was a marvel of alien engineering, with holographic displays showing star charts that spanned entire galactic sectors. Navigation data streamed across multiple screens while communication arrays maintained contact with what appeared to be hundreds of other Dominion vessels. Marcus quickly interfaced with the communication systems, uploading a data mining program from his military communicator that began copying everything it could access. Navigation charts, fleet compositions, communication protocols, and tactical assessments poured into the device's memory storage. What he discovered made his blood run cold. The invasion fleet heading toward human space contained over 2,000 ships, each one comparable in size to the vessel he was currently aboard. The Dominion wasn't planning a conquest, they were planning complete annihilation, followed by harvesting of the remnants. Worse, the timeline was accelerated. The fleet would reach Earth in less than a week, not the months that human strategists had assumed based on his earlier intelligence. The Dominion had been deceiving their human prisoner about the invasion schedule, letting him think he had more time to gather intelligence while they prepared their final assault. Marcus transmitted the updated intelligence to Admiral Rodriguez immediately. "Admiral, the invasion timeline has changed. The Dominion fleet will reach Earth in 6 days, not weeks. Fleet strength is over 2,000 ships, each carrying enhanced specimens and biological weapons." The response was immediate and filled with controlled panic. "Commander, that intelligence changes everything. We're accelerating all defensive preparations and recalling every available ship to Earth. Can you disable your current vessel to prevent it from rejoining the invasion fleet?" Marcus looked around the command core, studying the control systems that managed the ship's primary functions. "Affirmative, Admiral. I'm initiating a complete system shutdown that should disable the vessel permanently." But as Marcus began accessing the ship's critical systems, alarms began sounding throughout the command core. His presence had been detected, and emergency protocols were activating to prevent unauthorized access to vital ship functions. The final confrontation came as Marcus fought desperately to complete the ship's shutdown sequence, while Dominion forces breached the sealed command core. Shadow had positioned itself between Marcus and the main entrance, its wounded form radiating determination, despite the energy burns across its enhanced hide. The creature had somehow understood that protecting the human was more important than its own survival. Marcus's fingers flew across alien control interfaces as blast doors exploded inward under concentrated energy fire. The Dominion's most elite security forces poured into the command core, their weapons trained on the human who had single-handedly thrown their ship into chaos. But they hesitated, apparently under orders to capture him alive rather than simply eliminate the threat. That hesitation cost them dearly. Shadow launched itself at the leading security team with a roar that seemed to shake the ship's superstructure. Enhanced claws met advanced armor in a shower of sparks and energy discharges. The creature was magnificent in its fury, embodying everything the Dominion had tried to create and control, now turned against them with lethal purpose. "Admiral, I'm initiating final shutdown protocols," Marcus reported through his communicator while dodging energy bolts that seared the air around him. "The ship's core systems are responding to my commands, but I'm not sure I can complete the sequence before they stop me. Commander, hold your position. Our fastest ships have accelerated beyond safe parameters. We're now 4 hours out and closing rapidly. 4 hours. Marcus looked around the command core as battles raged between Shadow and multiple security teams. The enhanced creature was holding them back, but it was clearly outmatched by their numbers and coordinated tactics. 4 hours might as well have been 4 days. But then Marcus discovered something in the ship's central systems that changed everything. The Dominion vessel wasn't just a collection ship. It was a command node for the entire invasion fleet. Its communication arrays were linked to every other ship in the Armada, providing coordination and tactical updates in real time. If he could corrupt those communications, he might be able to create chaos throughout the entire fleet. Working with desperate precision, Marcus began uploading a virus-like program from his military communicator directly into the Dominion's fleet communication network. The program was designed to propagate through alien computer systems, creating cascading failures and communication blackouts. It was crude compared to the sophisticated alien technology, but sometimes crude solutions were the most effective against advanced systems that weren't designed to defend against primitive attacks. The virus spread through the fleet network like wildfire. Marcus watched through the command core's displays as ship after ship began reporting system failures and communication breakdowns. The carefully coordinated invasion fleet was dissolving into confused chaos as commanders lost contact with their subordinates and navigation systems began providing conflicting information. Shadow's roar of pain brought Marcus's attention back to the immediate situation. The enhanced creature had been struck by multiple energy weapons and was struggling to maintain its defensive position. More Dominion forces were pouring into the command core, and their weapons were specifically designed to incapacitate rather than kill. Marcus realized they intended to capture him alive, probably to study his tactics and determine how much damage he had caused to their operations. That knowledge gave him one final option. Though it would require a sacrifice he wasn't sure he was prepared to make. The ship's central power core was accessible from the command center through emergency override protocols. If Marcus could trigger a controlled overload, the resulting explosion would destroy the vessel entirely, eliminating a command node and preventing the Dominion from analyzing his methods. But it would also ensure that neither he nor Shadow would survive to see the outcome of their actions. "Admiral, I can destroy this vessel completely, but it will require manual detonation of the power core," Marcus reported while energy bolts continued to flash around him. "The explosion will eliminate a major command node and provide cover for your approaching ships." "Negative, Commander. We need you alive to provide intelligence about Dominion capabilities. Hold your position and wait for extraction." But Marcus could see that extraction was no longer possible. The Dominion forces had adapted to his tactics and were systematically overwhelming his defenses. Shadow was down, wounded too badly to continue fighting, and Marcus's remaining equipment was nearly exhausted. More importantly, the virus he had introduced into the fleet network was beginning to lose effectiveness as Dominion technicians developed countermeasures. If he didn't act soon, they would restore their communications and continue toward Earth with only minor delays. Marcus made his decision. Moving to the power core override controls, he began initiating a cascade failure that would overload the ship's primary energy systems. The process would take several minutes to complete, during which he would need to defend the controls from Dominion attempts to abort the sequence. Shadow, despite its injuries, dragged itself to Marcus's side and took up a final defensive position. The enhanced creature's loyalty was absolute, choosing to die beside the human who had freed it rather than surrender to its former masters. The Dominion forces recognized what Marcus was attempting and abandoned their capture protocols in favor of stopping the power core overload. Energy weapons fired at maximum output, while security teams rushed toward the override controls. But they were too late. Marcus completed the final sequence just as the first Dominion soldier reached him. The ship's power core began its unstoppable cascade toward critical failure, sending vibrations through the superstructure that grew stronger with each passing second. "Admiral, I've initiated core overload," Marcus reported calmly through his communicator. "Estimate 5 minutes until detonation. The explosion should disrupt any Dominion ships in the immediate area and provide excellent cover for your fleet's approach. Commander Chen, you've exceeded every expectation and provided intelligence that may save humanity. Your sacrifice will not be forgotten." As the power core's overload approached critical levels, Marcus sat beside Shadow and watched the chaos his actions had created. The enhanced creature's breathing was labored, but its eyes remained alert and focused on him with what appeared to be gratitude. Through the command core's displays, Marcus could see the continuing effects of his virus on the Dominion fleet. Ships were colliding with each other as navigation systems failed. Communication breakdowns had led to friendly fire incidents. The carefully orchestrated invasion had become a disaster that would take weeks or months to reorganize. Most importantly, his intelligence had reached Earth with enough time for meaningful defensive preparations. The approaching human fleet would find a Dominion armada in chaos rather than the coordinated war machine that had conquered countless civilizations. The ship's superstructure began tearing itself apart as the power core reached critical failure. Marcus felt the deck plating beneath him buckle and warp from the incredible energies being unleashed in the ship's heart. But he also felt something else. Satisfaction at a mission completed against impossible odds. Shadow's final act was to place a massive paw on Marcus's shoulder, a gesture that somehow conveyed both thanks and farewell. Then the enhanced creature closed its eyes and was still. Marcus closed his own eyes and thought about Earth, about the billions of humans who would now have a chance to defend themselves because of the intelligence he had gathered. The Dominion had made a critical error when they captured what they thought was a simple researcher. They had captured a Navy SEAL. The explosion, when it came, was visible across several star systems. The Dominion command ship's destruction sent shockwaves through their invasion fleet that went far beyond the physical effects of the blast. For the first time in their long history of conquest, the Dominion had encountered a species that refused to submit quietly to harvesting and study. Admiral Rodriguez and the approaching human fleet found the scattered remnants of the Dominion armada 3 hours later. Confused and demoralized by the loss of their command structure, many enemy ships surrendered without a fight. Others attempted to flee toward Dominion space, but they were pursued and captured by human vessels whose crews were motivated by the heroic example of Marcus Chen. The intelligence Marcus had transmitted to Earth became the foundation for humanity's successful defense against the Dominion invasion. His sacrifice had not only disrupted the immediate threat, but had provided the knowledge necessary to turn the tide of an interstellar war. When the final Dominion ship was either captured or destroyed, Admiral Rodriguez composed her report on the engagement. It began with a simple statement that would echo through human history. The enemy made one fatal mistake. They captured a human, but they didn't know he was a Navy SEAL. Marcus Chen had proven that courage, determination, and tactical brilliance could overcome even the most advanced alien technology. His legacy would inspire generations of human defenders and serve as a warning to any species that mistook humanity's apparent weakness for vulnerability. The galaxy had learned that humans, when pushed to their limits, were far more dangerous than they appeared.